We're on?
Yes.
You just got to spring it on me like that? Yeah. Take a sip of my unclean Poland Springs water. Hello, friends. I am Oliver Ox. Welcome to the Doing Better show. It is Sunday, so we're going to do our Sunday sanity check, talk about the news of the week, all the things going on, and there are lots of things going on. So that's exciting. We're going to talk a little about the protests that have been happening this weekend, a couple different perspectives on that. Touch back in on the big, beautiful bill and what's going on with that. Just get another little nugget of how it's a failed conservative project. Talk about Iran, obviously. We got more a little Gaza news. Just want to touch on this Minnesota story. It's wild. And then a little bit here, a little bit there. A local story. There's a whole bunch of hubbub about a Chinese company buying the water supply or part of a water supply in Nashua. If you read the headlines, it's Chinese are buying Nashua's water. I think it's a little more complicated than that, but it's kind of interesting. Maybe something we should be concerned about. Personal issue that I want to talk about, and another one of these things. We were talking earlier. I'm just like in a place of angst right now, and I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to woo-saw as much as possible, and mental health and all those things. But there's some economic signs that are a little scary right now, and some of them come from my favorite industry. We all have a thing that we're stupid nerds for, and the thing I'm a stupid nerd for a lot of things, but the number one thing I'm a stupid nerd for is cars. I love stupid cars. And the EV industry, in the EV used market, there's some scary signs in the used market in general in cars and people that relate to the amount of debt that people are under for cars. And there's some really scary signs specifically when it comes to EVs. So we're going to chat about that a little bit and maybe get into some other stuff. I want to talk about some gambling stuff, something we've talked about a lot lately. So that's our plan for today. I am joined today by Amberly is here. Hi, Amberly. How are you? Amberly's here.
Great. How are you?
Good.
Well, as good as we can.
Well, yeah. And with Amberly, we have a new guest who I'm very excited to meet today. Kyle Davis is with us. Hi, Kyle.
Hello.
Kyle, you are a city councilor in Salem, New Hampshire. Salem, Massachusetts.
Very close,
Whoa.
yes.
Yes,
Sure am.
very excited. Yes, we are very close to Salem, New Hampshire right now, but you are from Salem, Massachusetts, which is probably a pretty interesting place to be a city councilor. So that's going to be our main topic for later on today. We're going to talk talk to Kyle about what it's like getting involved in the city council. This will probably be our second city council. We had Katrina Hobbs Everett from Haverhill who was on and chatted with us a couple times actually. So we're really excited to talk about that. We're big into the local politics here because sometimes national politics can leave you with a feeling, right? And like feel very inaccessible. So I always liked it. And I think we have it's all of our focus. We're super hyper focused on presidential elections and everything national story, these big, scary stories that almost always leave you feeling at least helpless. And it's very different in local politics. So I'm really excited to hear from you and your takes on your time in the Salem City Council. All right, let's talk about the protests. So I think, is there one going on like down the street? I heard banging and I heard drums and stuff. I don't know, but Lawrence is live in the summer, so it could have just been some festival or something.
Yeah. No.
I know there were lots yesterday.
Yeah.
Did you guys happen to see or participate in or what do you know? What are you seeing?
I was at the one in Salem.
And
I got up there and spoke. We had over 1,000 people. It was pretty huge. I mean, where they have them, and we've been having them a lot, is at a pretty small park. So to see like over 1,000 people show up is quite the sight to see. It was a good time. Yeah.
Emily, what was your experience?
So I actually went to the one that was like in conjunction with the Pride Parade in Boston.
Because a lot of places were planning to have Pride this weekend regardless, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that Boston Pride is the second Saturday of every June. So now I know to take it off every year.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So it was you went to the Boston one?
Yeah.
And how was that?
I mean, I had to leave around 2 because I had work, but from what I saw, it was just a huge picture of solidarity. It was, it was nice because it was interspersed with the parade itself.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of representation and calls for action.
So
cool.
the thing that I'm always generally, whatever the protest is, I'm generally like, oh, interesting. And I'm generally pro-protest. I'm generally anti-authoritarian of all kinds. So, like, the vibe of this sounds good to me, right? Like, it seems like a reaction to ICE stuff, right? That seems like a big push. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And some reaction to Trump and executive order related stuff, right? Is there like a goal of these protests?
That is my kind of concern, frustration sometimes, right? I mean, I think if you have, like, I think in Boston, there were over 1 million people that showed up, right? And I think without really specific calls to action to get involved, it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. So I was, these have been going on and I've seen videos and it feels like a mix. Like sometimes there is really good kind of like call for support for local organizations and like how to get involved, and there's candidates that get up and maybe they get volunteers out of that. But if not, I feel like there's a missed opportunity there.
Because I wonder, like, if it's a big like Trump sucks party, like, okay, like then what, right? Like, it's still the president, still directing things, roughly in the ways that he is. I wonder about that. And did you see any of the stuff about the Walmart connection, the Walton connection to this? So if you go into so I am someone, as Amberly knows, I like to make sure I get my toes in all the little puddles. So like my TikTok algorithm is probably one of the wider, stranger ones. I try to find the weirdos in all directions. But if you look at the sort of right anti this, the red hat explanation of this is it's another one of these George Soros type, billionaire backed, anti-American, purposely disruptive, whatever. And Ann Walton, Christy Walton, one of the Walmart kids, right? Because I think 4 of the 10 richest people in this country are kids of Sam Walton, the Walmart guy. That was true a few years ago. I don't know if that's still true. Probably some hedge fund douchebag snuck in there or whatever. But regardless, the Walmart people have lots of money, and she was promoting and was funding a lot of the advertisement and stuff for this. Again, to me, that doesn't delegitimize it, but it does raise some questions, especially when you think about what Ann Walton, or not Ann, I keep saying Ann, it must be one of the others, is Christy Walton, what she cares about, right? And it seems like there's an anti-Trump vibe that she might have that I think is very different from what the rest of the protesters care about, right? So, like, I think she probably cares about cheap labor from illegal immigration. That's probably pretty high on her list of things that she cares about. I'm guessing tariffs. Probably not a big fan of tariffs because they want to sell us as much Chinese crap as they can, right? And with a little concern for American workers or for and of course Walmart is the biggest welfare queen in the country, right? Walmart workers are the largest consumers of all social services because Walmart doesn't pay people a living wage. So that's my concern is that like sometimes these really well-intentioned movements, because they don't have that direction, because it's just sort of like a Trump sucks protest, like is there some other thing going on here? And so that was really my concern with these, and none of that's an answer. I guess I think that you have to have a. Let me give you my one of my little spiel things that sort of got me going. So one of my, Des, you want to give me my screen, please? So this is Comrade Misty is Putin's bitch. I believe this is one of my favorite. One of my favorite sort of far lefty people who says she fucking hates liberals. And when far lefty people say this, they mean like establishment Democrat types, right? Not like the left. So the sign here, it says, this guy said, the most Los Angeles sign ever, and it's true. If Kamala were president, would be at brunch. And I think for lots of people who have been anti-authoritarian, anti-corporate, anti-Wall Street, sort of think of the Occupy Wall Street ilk, right? Like that really rubs me the wrong way, because if Kamala were president, I think 90% of the situation on the ground would be identical. And I have a tough time. It wouldn't be as in your face, this Tom Homan, Donald Trump, we're going to drag him down in the streets and make big fucking scenes. Like, they wouldn't do that.
You heard those Kristi Noem commercials?
Oh, my God.
I thought it was satire at first. It literally sounded like a Hunger Games ad. I was like, we will find you, and you will never come back. That's crazy. That's really threatening.
Well, and the thing is, that one is in the best idea I've heard from the entire administration about illegal immigration, which is just pay people money and fly them home, right? Like that's the one they're offering people $1,000. They're like, if you're here illegally, we'll give you $1,000 in a plane ticket, go home. And like, to me, I mean, make that $5 or $10 grand. That sounds like probably the cheapest way if you actually want to deport people. Like, that sounds like a pretty cost-effective way to do it, because I guarantee thugs hopping out of vans with masks on is a lot more than $10,000 a person to deport them or whatever, right? And you would theoretically get rid of the legal side of it. I think my point here is that I think we're sort of lost in something we've talked about before, is there's no logical conversation about the immigration thing. It seems like it's either like, just get everybody out of my country, took our jobs, right? Or it's like the sort of left side of it is like, there's no problem, you guys are all making it up. So, but like, what's your take? What's the solution to immigration? Like, we do have, by whatever estimate, maybe 10 million people here in this country who don't have legal documentation to do so. We currently have a border. I personally am not attached to borders. I'm not a nationalist. I frankly wouldn't care if we had no borders and everyone. I think that people should have freedom of motion and go wherever they want in the world. But we currently have countries and we currently have borders. So, like, what's the solution to our current problem? Any thoughts?
Make it easier to become a citizen here,
We've
right? I mean, I'm more on the
side.
side of it's not a problem, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we thrive off of immigration. Yeah. We actually probably need a whole lot more of it. If you look at like immigration patterns over like throughout the decades, we're actually kind of like at a low point.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, this is like a reaction to fear mongering and the kind of Southern strategy and all of that. But
can you explain that's a great point you make? Can you explain the Southern strategy, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially the coalition of you essentially get the religious right and people that are bigoted, in various different ways, along with the kind of big moneyed interests, and you have a very large kind of connected coalition there that can win elections, right? And you essentially have to pretend that non-issues are issues, right? So that's kind of, it feels like the seeds of where we are now, of we're living in alternate realities, right? Where it's not like, okay, there's this problem, how do we figure out what the best solution is for it? It's, no, there isn't a problem, but one side is manufacturing a problem and getting very upset over something that isn't happening and doesn't matter, right? No one's life is worse because I have a lot of neighbors in my communities that are awesome and wonderful people, and they give back to the community, and whether or not they have papers or are going through the process or aren't going through it legally, it doesn't affect anyone's lives.
So I roughly tend to agree with you, but I want to push back on a couple things. So one, I would say, is it a problem or not? I think is it the problem that it was worth being the number one thing that got Trump elected? Absolutely not. I think when you look at the focus and we say the immigrants are the problem, that is fundamentally not true. So I fundamentally disagree with that. But to say that there was no problem, I think the border, I think during the Biden administration, the border was fairly overtly opened, right? I think there were many opportunities. There were, when Greg Abbott was trying to close up some places where people were physically crossing, and the Biden administration was fighting them. When there's a whole the whole NGO, I don't know if you've seen any of that, the sort of NGO funnel of helping people migrate into the United States illegally. So I think I think there was, during the Biden administration, I think there was a ton of illegal immigration. I think the fact that it's illegal is problematic.
The Biden administration deported records amount of people.
They absolutely did.
And so did Obama.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Biden more than Trump did in his first term. So that's absolutely fact. Yeah. So like, but I don't. I think when you say the things that other people think are problems are just not even a problem at all. I think it does. There are certain realities that we're not recognizing here. I think so. One, there are some small towns that have been, they will say, like, effectively invaded. They've doubled their population in like 5 or 10 years, and I think the stress that's going to put on the local community, I think, is significant. Like, you can't, if you're in a town of 10,000 people and you double the number of people there, well, your schools, your hospitals, and whatever, they don't grow at that same rate. So I think the left dismissing this as a problem at all, I think, is part of why the right is so like extra angry about it. Now, I would always point back to the power structures, and I would never blame an individual immigrant. I think that individual immigrant making the choice is never going to be the guy who,
At the end of the day, I think it's less of it not being a problem. Like, it's less saying that it's just not a problem, and more wanting to address the actual root of the problem. Like, if money wasn't hoarded at the fucking top,
absolutely.
Would we be talking about this in the same way? Absolutely not. If resources were readily available and accessible, if we had more money for the communities to set up things that would make the process smoother, this is not an issue that we would be talking about. But obviously, they don't want us to be talking about that.
I think
local communities struggle with resources because of the system that we live in, and because of the right hoarding money at the top and defunding necessary programs, right? Anytime you are thinking about, you have to be suspicious of any kind of theory that says you have problems because of someone who has less power than you.
So that I could not agree more with, and I think what you're saying is also 100% accurate. I just don't want to dismiss that there is an issue. And again, I think mass immigration is a problem. I think it's a problem that we fundamentally caused by our foreign policy. I think blowing up every other fucking country in the planet and letting our corporations run roughshod, all the steal resources. I mean, that's what our corporations have done.
It's
for
also a
100 years,
problem
right?
that we caused by making immigration more illegal, right? There was a
100%
time period in
true.
American history where people would very easily come in from Mexico and South America to work jobs seasonally, and then they would go back.
100%.
And the second we made it harder to be transigent like that, the easier, like, we created the problem.
I think that's 100% true. And one thing that I find really frustrating about this is that with technology, all of these things should have got easier, right? Like applying for a work permit, if you want to travel from El Salvador to California to go, pick fruit for the summer, right? Should be like, upload my picture, okay, done. Okay, cool. I'm going to my. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no. If Amazon.com was in charge of it, it would be incredibly efficient.
Expedited.
Well, and this is why I think when people are saying, "Hey, this is a really big problem," and they're angry about it, I don't think the answer is to say, yes, you're right, and to validate that, like, causality, which is fundamentally wrong. I think it's to say, no, your anger is righteous. You're just angry at the wrong people, right? You're not making terrible wages because of an immigrant being here that doesn't have papers, right? You're making terrible wages because your boss sucks and we're living in a capitalist system, and because of...
How funny was it that Trump was like, we've had some really good farmers here for 20 years. Gotta try to get them back.
I didn't.
What they're doing.
I didn't hear that. No, I didn't. I didn't see
really?
that thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
You did.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. He was doubling. Hold on. I can actually.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'd love to see it.
I should have sent it to you.
Yeah, I think I will. I think the general view that you can always find someone higher on the totem pole financially to blame rather than someone lower is 100% accurate, and I will never argue with that. I think, and again, I think when you look at the immigrants are the problem argument. That is usually based on this false idea that all you have to do is just do it legally and that's easy. And as someone who immigrated to this country legally, it's not fucking easy. Like it took, I think it was 15 years that we were working to get the green card and all that stuff. Like so, and again, these are all things that we can make infinitely easier, much quicker. With minimal technology. Were there other things that you guys picked up on at the protest that you thought were central issues? Because we got diverted on the first issue that we talked about, which was good. So
but
what other?
I had go for it.
Sorry, no, I do have to say I have seen pushback, but not because of who was running it or anything. It was just more of like it was great for solidarity. Obviously, it's good to know that so many people are in the same boat, but what are we, like what you guys were saying, what are we actually doing that's giving tangible results? Yeah. I saw a lot of people saying that just because the protests were very peaceful for the most part, at least like Boston. I don't think I heard anything.
I mean, I think that's
off.
They always will make sure any big protest, they'll make sure there's some piece of violence that they can show to delegitimize the protest, right? Like no matter what, any protest, as soon as one person throws one bottle, that's all the news is going to focus on, right?
Well,
like,
so my friend went to the one in New York and she was like, it was very peaceful. The cops didn't have to be called and that's great. But like we're placating a police state. Like we're not saying what we actually feel and how, you know.
Yeah, and I think just because we haven't seen really tangible, like, clear asks or clear, like, measures of success come from these doesn't mean there's not potential, right? I mean, it felt to me like my job as, like, a left-wing activist, as someone who's, you know, in the city council, and someone who's been thinking about how can we take this potential and make it useful. Like, that was kind of my job going into how I was making a speech. And I think that a lot of times, like, you know, the sign that you pulled up of we could all be at brunch, right? It feels like there is that lack of just clarity of what's next from a lot of folks. And so I think part of my job was to expose folks to, you know, I think, you know, left-wing activists and people on Twitter and left-wing politicians have a real clear sense of what needs to be done now and where we need to go, and they have a clear vision. So trying to foster that a little bit. I mean, I led the crowd in a abolish ICE chant, which people were very excited about, right? We're talking about 1,000 plus, you know, probably mostly mainstream liberal people who I think while they have this hatred towards Trump, I don't know if they've necessarily kind of committed to, like, let's abolish this federal agency, right? That is something that has come from
radical
left-wingers, right?
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like people thought it was radical when they were joining that chant, right? So,
well, and to put it in context, remember ICE has only existed since as part of the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
So like ICE is not
2003.
This is not a long time, you know, staple of America, right? This is not some institution that we couldn't survive and exist without. 2003, like it's. Right. That's not that long ago.
And so I think they're, you know, by and large, I don't know if the people that are organizing these protests have that kind of clarity, but I think that it could be the job and it could be successful if left-wing activists and like organizations like DSA are able to go in there and provide that clarity and provide that, like, here's the next steps. Here's how we can actually build something that's long-lasting and not just showing up for a day and showing up for a day next year and then hopefully going back to brunch.
Do you think that so you talk about being a left-wing activist and sort of getting this, you give some this energy in the left. Do you think there are some more universal ideas or principles that could unite more than just the left? Because it seems like we unite the left and unite the right every few years and don't seem to get too far with it. So like, do you think there are more universal? So like, because I think back to the fact that the overlap between Obama voters and Trump voters was huge, right? There was like a massive overlap there. The overlap between Bernie voters and Trump voters also pretty significant. So I think, and the Trump voters that I spoke to were very few of the occasional Trump sycophants. Like there's some red hatters who just like have all the Kool-Aid. So like those people, I don't, whatever. Like any sycophants, I don't tend to take them too seriously. But
there's 20% of the population that's too far gone. They're not going to be convinced
exactly.
by anything.
But the vast majority of Trump, thank you for that, by the way. The vast majority of Trump voters that I spoke to were like, they thought he was the most anti-establishment thing possible, and that's what they were voting for. And like, I feel like those people are like ripe for the picking if you have a good message.
So I think the answer is economic justice, right? It's actually improving people's material conditions, right? We should not have been in a position after 4 years of a Democratic president where someone could make the argument, as Trump did, you're going to have more money in your pocket once I'm president. Things are going to be cheaper because of me, right? We can talk about how that was bullshit. We can talk about how, he was never, we could talk about there was no plan. He talked about concepts of a plan, right? But, I mean, the fact that he was even able to make that argument and a significant amount of the population was like, yeah, I'm going to vote for the guy that's going to make things cheaper. Why didn't the Democrats do that, right? That's an indictment of the Democratic Party. That's an indictment of when we're in power, we're too afraid to take radical steps that are actually going to help people, right? Like, what happened to the $15 minimum wage? Like, what happened to, and there were some improvements around the edges, but, I think at the end of 4 years, you should be able to say, your life is a whole lot better. Like, we've strengthened the working class and the middle class to such an extent that no amount of political posturing could shield your eyes from that. Like, it should be so obvious to people, when Democrats are in charge, you're doing better. And that just hasn't been the case for really long, right? To be clear, like, they are better, but it needs to be so drastically that it's like, there's no argument.
I mean, I think that's a great point. It seemed to me that certainly in this last election, but for a few elections, it doesn't seem like Democrats have had a strong message, period. Other than the other guys are fucking terrible, right?
Yes.
Like, the entire argument has tended to be the other guys are terrible. And there hasn't been a strong, here's what we're going to do to make your life,
I follow politics very closely. I voted for Kamala Harris because I didn't want Trump. I have no idea why she wanted to be president. I have no idea what her, like, top 3, let alone, like, top 1 issue was. Like, this is what I'm going to do to help you once I'm president. I don't know. Like, we should know. We should be able to point to, like, this is how your life would have been better if Kamala Harris was president. Like, I got nothing.
It's my sense that Gaza was a really bad issue for the Democrats at the end of the day, and I don't think that I think that Ukraine similarly was not helpful, because I think it takes away for when I religiously voted Democrat. It was because the Democrats were clearly the anti-war party at that point in time, and I've been clearly an anti-war voter since the first time I walked into the booth. And for me, like, that's gone. Like, the Democrats is the anti-war party. I think if you ask most voters, they would have said Trump was the anti-war guy between him and Kamala. And like, that's a scary position to be in when you can say Trump is the peace candidate. Again,
it was BS and it was never true, but he was able to make the argument because we haven't been a very clear, like, stick to the message when we're in power, we're consistent about it, like, very clear branding.
And he did, and Trump once started no new wars. Every other president in my lifetime has started new wars. And he was still a war criminal. He still did 1,000 things, dropped the mother of all bombs and did all that crap. But he didn't actually start a new war. So he had like a little bit of resume, at least, to be like, hey, I'm the anti-war guy. And because Biden had been giving Netanyahu money to fund genocide, I think that was gone. And with the Ukraine situation, when we're giving them $60 billion a year for a war that's clearly they weren't going to win, I think that hurt that argument as well. That hurt that progressive anti-war sort of coalition that I'm certain got Obama elected.
I think Ukraine is more complicated. I think that people were having their land stolen by like a right-wing fascist colonizing government, right? I mean, you can go back and forth on like how much money should we have given and like was that war winnable, right? But I think Palestine is clear cut, right? And it's even more clear cut in terms of like how much that hurt us. When you look at the people that did, the whole uncommitted campaign, right? The numbers of people that voted uncommitted in Michigan and Minnesota are very similar to the number of votes that Kamala Harris did not win by in those states, right? That's pretty clear.
And those are people who are willing to come out to the poll and make that point.
And they voted the Democratic primary.
Most people just sit on their ass, right? Yeah. They go, oh, I'm not showing up today.
Those are winnable people,
right? And I think that was a lot of votes lost. let's move on for now. Well, I'm sure we can go back. I want to talk about. I just want to. I got I thought this was a great little tweet from Rand Paul, who's definitely on the opposite side of things as you, but I think one of the strongest. I think Thomas Massey has been the strongest Trump administration critic, and Rand Paul's been pretty good too. I want to share this because I saw this and it fucking pissed me off. Des, will you share this with me, please? That's great. Thank you. The big, beautiful bill that Danny rightfully pointed out last week is a stupid name for anything in a civilized country. Gives $695 million to FIFA.
What?
Yeah.
How much was his birthday parade yesterday?
Oh, I don't even know. Yeah. Whatever. I can't even get into that one. But this is just so. This sports team funding thing that we do as a society, when we give billionaires who own sports teams, we give them like hundreds of millions of dollars of public funds, so they'll build their stadiums in our cities.
Is that what it is?
Oh yeah, they do it all. So like they'll
They
threaten,
just have stadiums.
like if this happened to the Raiders in Oakland, like the owner will be like, "Hey Oakland, build us a stadium or we're leaving," and then Oakland says, "Well, hey, like we need to feed children and like build schools and stuff, so we don't have $800 million dollars to fund your stadium." Then the owner goes, "Fuck you, I'm moving to Vegas," and they move to Vegas and they build a giant death-looking structure there in Vegas to have their teams. But this is just another example of it. It got into this again after Doge. We're supposed to be dealing with all this stuff, right? We're not supposed to be funding, transgender studies in Uzbekistan, and we're not supposed to be giving $695 million to incredibly rich international corporations that run sports.
Feels like that was the point.
It seems, again, it's just such...
That's why every singular thing that either of them have said, I immediately believe the opposite to be true. I'm like, that's horrible. Like, they're saying good things, and the whole time I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible. We're never going to go back.
But I think, so that's the thing that I worry about. I think the whole Trump experience has really lowered the quality of the discourse in this country. Because I think the easiest way to make someone on the left hate something is to say Trump did it, right? Like, so tariffs historically were more popular on the left as an economic tool, right? As a taxation tool than they were on the right. The old pre-Trump world, the right would have hated tariffs and the left would have been generally pro-tariffs. But since Trump said tariffs, everyone on the left is like, worst thing ever.
They're politically ruined now.
Yeah,
right?
no,
There's
so
a smart
literally,
way
yeah.
to do tariffs. It's if you have an understanding of economics and you're not just like trying to it's not just like a penis measuring contest.
Well,
right.
right. That's exactly the point that I made when they first came out. I was like, I'm not inherently against tariffs, but this doing the Trump negotiation, whatever hard line, art of the deal horseshit that he does.
Free trade is disastrous, right? That's why companies win overseas. That's why millions of people in the Midwest don't have jobs or hope anymore. It's horrible. Right?
Yeah, I think it's 100%
this is
true.
going to destroy that discourse of that subject for a very long time.
And I think there's another way in which you sort of that old left-right thing sort of falls down, because Clinton gave us NAFTA, right? And the Democratic Party is still super pro-free trade, and they've let Trump take this sort of typically progressive-ish position of protectionism, which is something that, again, in the old days, that was a left thing, and the Republicans would have hated it. I like guys like Rand Paul because although I don't agree with much of what he says, they're very consistent. Rand Paul is going to call out some bad spending there, so I thought that was interesting.
He doesn't, but it's like a broken clock, right? He wouldn't enjoy spending for healthcare and for schools either.
No, right. So, but I think, that's a logically consistent position, right? The libertarian right will say, we don't think government is good at solving problems, so we don't want to empower government. And I think that's a defensible position. It's something that I at least half believe myself. I tend to be I tend to lean in that direction, having worked in multiple government-funded industries.
It's far too simple-minded.
It is,
right?
Of course it is.
We've got a federal government that, erase the problem of seniors having to rely on cat food in their old age because we have Social Security, which is an incredibly popular program that helps so many people, and also they probably killed JFK and MLK. They can
Right.
be both, and they are both.
I
Yeah.
agree 100%.
And, But yeah, that I had to point that, and that drives me crazy. They're like, government doing something equals bad. Well, what did they do?
No, so I think it's an oversimplification, but there is a piece of that because this is again the old argument against government spending, right? It's you spending other people's money on things not for you. And it's like the least efficient way to spend money, right? Like the best way to spend money is you pay for something and you get it, right?
No,
Like,
it's the most efficient way to spend money because if you're giving money to corporations to solve problems, they have to make a profit. So you got a middleman that has to also make a living there.
I think the argument from the right would be that you're not trying to we want individuals solving problems, not corporations solving problems. And our current government model largely involves giving corporations all the money to solve the problems, right? Like it's government contractors and whatever. I would tend to say we have the worst of both worlds. Like our healthcare system is like this perfect storm of like regulation that helps corporations and public funding that doesn't seem, although we spend $1 trillion plus a year on Medicare and Medicaid, we still don't have fucking health insurance. So like, anyway,
the problem there is the corporations being involved.
I 100% agree, 100%. But they wrote, it's all written in, right? Like Obamacare was the greatest thing that corporations ever saw, right? Like if you're a big pharma or your health insurance.
And they essentially paid him to do it because they own it. But yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk briefly. We'll fly through lots of new stuff. Iran is popping off this week. It's hard to feel mentally okay. That's what we were talking about earlier. Like, bruh, this shit it's stressful to pay attention. Like, it's really stressful to pay attention. And stuff like this, it just feels so scary. So I got a quick so Al Jazeera put out a quick list of key events here from what's been happening. So this all started, we were supposed to be having these nuclear negotiations. They were set to happen, and then Israel decided to go ahead and bomb Iran before those negotiations, sort of derailing them. And there's been lots of firing back and forth. So Iran set 2 sets of missiles, injured 15 people. Israel responded, killed 224, injured 1,400, and then another one back. A couple of the things that have come out of this. One, the Iron Dome, Israel's Iron Dome that we have heavily helped fund for many years, is not impenetrable. Iran showed this a few months ago. I believe it was related to stuff with I'm drawing with Yemen. I believe that was the first time that they were able to get things across the Iron Dome. And this time they've had multiple strikes inside Israel and are actually making contact. They have hypersonic missiles, which is fairly high tech. And it seems like it's hitting ahead. The last thing I heard, I hadn't seen any commitments out of Trump. Again, fundamentally, we fund everything that Israel does. Israel would not be able to carry out any military on any kind of level like this without our funding. So there's an implicit okay with it. Supposedly, Netanyahu told Trump ahead of time before he was going to strike, but we have not yet committed, as far as I know, unless something has happened in the last couple hours, to joining, right?
Yeah, I think I saw something that said that we actually were not involved in that at all.
Even though Israel said that we were.
Yeah.
But Israel just says what they want. Like,
of course.
Yeah, right. There's one little clip I want to share, which I think was pretty well. Go away. There we go. Des, give me the screen for a second. So this is just crazy to see. So this is an F-35. Where's the good part? Hold on. It's just so surreal to see this stuff. Jesus. Where's the head up? So I must have missed the one. I had the video of the F-35 getting shot down, which I want because this underlies the fact that there is none of this happens with us. Because the F-35 was an American, Des, give me this real quick. This is an American program. If you pay attention, if you're someone who pays attention to corruption, the F-35 should be something you know a lot about. It's a jet fighter program that lots of people have been criticizing for being incredibly expensive and wasteful. It's been a $2 trillion project. So that these airplanes that they supposedly now shot down 3 of go between $82 and $102 million a pop.
Where was Doge then?
Well, so this is it's actually Steve Bannon who said this, which is wild. But Steve Bannon, when Doge was first happening, said if Doge is serious, we'll know Doge is serious if they go across the Potomac to the Pentagon. And he was right about that, because Doge didn't go across the Pentagon and they weren't serious, right? Like when we have a $1 trillion military budget, and we've played video stuff of it before, when you show like people do an analysis of like some of the things that we some of the money we spend on military contract, and it's like $700 for a toilet seat, and like, you know, $3,000 for a box of cereal, and like all these ridiculous upcharges, because there's huge amounts of corruption in military contractors, obviously. But it's just wild. Like, I don't know, you deal at the city level. $102 million. What could you do with $102 million in the city of Salem?
We could have saved all our teachers from being laid off. Yeah.
There you go.
And a whole lot more.
And a whole lot more, yeah. And probably built a new school for them to teach in as well. Like, it's the numbers that we deal with when we talk about anything on the military scale are just so out of whack. And we talked about this, I think it was 2 weeks ago, when you look at when you get rid of the, what do they call the budget that's not non-discretionary things in the budget. So when you take out the Medicare, Social Security, interest on the national debt, that like 75% of Trump's budget is either military or police in nature, and like that's a terrifying situation. And again, when these are, you know, $100 million planes, there was some F something or other that fell off aircraft carrier a few months ago, right? Those F-16s. I'm sure those are a good $50 million a pop, and it's just like, this is where our money is going.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard. I have a tough time seeing where the argument of the old right is on any of this stuff, like the old neocons, because the numbers are staggering. The numbers are staggering.
I love the joke that we're not a real country. We're just like 5 corporations in a trench coat with a military.
Yeah. Yeah, roughly. Yeah. So in other foreign news, Israel killed 59 Palestinians in Gaza, many while trying to get aid. I don't know if you guys have seen this story with they were some of this aid that's finally got to Gaza, where people are literally starving, and people, while trying to go and retrieve this food, were shot at, which I always do my best to see the perspective of the other side of the argument. This is one of those that I'm really being like, wait, what was the terrorist or something? Like, so.
Yeah, well, the goalpost on like what a terrorist is has been moved so many times, right? From people actively involved in terror, all the way to people whose parents voted at one point, you know, for Hamas.
Right.
Right. Which could extend to like,
Wasn't that,
the vast
20
majority of
years
Palestinians.
ago?
Yeah.
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 And when you look at the actual percentage of the people that are still alive that actually would have voted for Hamas, right? And again,
this is a majority non-adult country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very easy to get things like Hamas, that word has been drilled into your head with the word terrorism next to it over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to take a step back and get out of the definitions for a minute, get out of the words, get out of the semantics. And like, violence is violence. Whether you're killed by a government who's totally legitimate and that's totally fine, or a terrorist, you're still dead. You're still the same amount of dead. And Hamas has killed some tiny fraction of a percent of the people that our government has killed in the last 25 years, right? Like, since the war on terror, it's tough for me to see how we get any moral high ground in any of these things. And this, like, what do you support Hamas? Like, is that really the worst thing in the world? Like,
so to be clear, they are awful, right? It's a hateful ideology. It's anti-Semitic. They foster violence, right? But like you're exactly spot on. Like
Wait, you mean they hate the people that have been occupying them for the last 50 years and dehumanizing them? No way.
Yes.
That's shocking. How could you
I think-
hate
And
a
they
group?
also hate Jewish people for
But
being Jewish.
Which other Jewish people have they met?
I don't.
Saying-
I
I
understand what you're saying.
I know, and I know you're not taking the argument. I think it's so interesting. We just fall into these like default positions that like governments are good, non-government things are bad, Islamists bad, and like, but based on what?
Of course, yeah.
Based on the again, I am not pro Hamas. I don't like anybody who thinks that other people should die based on their religion at all. In fact, I'm just generally not pro violence at all. I believe in mind your own business and don't touch
It's a
people.
two things can be true situation,
It's
right?
exactly what
Hamas
it is. Thank you,
awful, and also like that is kind of irrelevant to the conversation of there is a genocide happening.
There we go.
And we're talking about an asymmetrical warfare, right? There is a state that is supported by the most powerful countries across the world that literally props them up in the ways you were describing, that has all the power, that is purposely murdering innocent people, right? And that's the other goalpost that seems to keep moving, right? Is we've become so used to innocent people dying in a war, right? What did we call it? During the Iraq days, collateral
damage,
damage,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
To the point where now, I don't know how it's so far removed from conspiritual, and it just feels like factual to say that's intentional to murder people where they're getting aid, right? Like what can you say?
I mean,
it's indefensible.
It started with bombing hospitals and doctors' houses and targeting people who would actually help the community stay alive.
Yeah. No, I think it's too true. No, I'm not. I was gonna take this back, but I'm not gonna do that. All right, so let's move on to a couple other things. I get some interesting things that I wanted to. We'll skip that one. Have you seen anything? So I just want to bring this one up for a second because I'd love to hear you guys take on it. I've done a little bit of reading into it, but I've just seen a bunch of stuff. Have you seen about this Ibrahim? What's his last name? Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso. Have you heard about this at all? So this is a small country in Africa. I've just so they just nationalized. They have a very strong leader who came in on a very popularly supported military coup. And he just nationalized their gold mines, 5 gold mining assets. And Kyle, I see your face of recognition. You know I want to talk about this. Usually when people do like really this is sort of a socialist national welfare thing and anti-foreign corporations. That's usually not wicked good for your long-term health. So there's Des, will you give me the shine over? So this, you'll see a lot of pictures of him like this, looking very military and authoritarian. I think it's interesting because I have a feeling he's going to be implicated in some sort of terrorism or something moving forward, because when people are this strong to take control of national resources, the last guy who did anything resembling this was Muammar Gaddafi, and he got raped to death, literally.
What?
That's how he died.
What?
We funded a coup. This is why I'm never Hillary Clinton, and we saw he died or something. This was during the Obama administration. They effectively CIA invaded Libya and overthrew that government, but Gaddafi had lots of faults, probably similar ones, sort of authoritarian leanings, the same way we go after guys like Fidel Castro, the same way we'll probably go after these guys. They're authoritarian, and they do things that are...
Why do you say he's authoritarian? You said he looks authoritarian.
Oh, no. Well, I just like the military hat and the military
that a
outfit and the
military
race.
hat?
Yes, I think, that's the military
Okay.
thing. And no, because he did come in a military coup. So it's reported to be widely popular among the people, but not.
Where is this again?
This is Burkina Faso. It's a little tiny African nation. Let's look at it on
But
the
we
map.
do
I guess
love
it's not that tiny.
governments sharing the wealth with their people, right? And this happens like in Alaska.
Oh,
If you-
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
if
so
you're-
that's a good one. Yeah, talk about that.
If you're a resident in Alaska, you are directly paid by the state. Oil?
Yeah, for
Right?
oil revenues, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone
And-
shares in the profit.
And at one point in time, it was like when the oil prices were super high, I want to say about 10 or 15 years ago, people were getting like big ass checks for the government.
Yeah.
But again, if you think about, this is one of the ways in which I certainly lean a little left. If you think about pumping things out of the ground, it's hard to say that that's not a socially owned. It's hard to be like,
it's a
no,
shared
I
resource.
own this stuff underneath the
Yeah.
ground. Like, it's hard to, even in the most libertarian view, it's hard to say like, well, how do you especially the world is round, and even if you own a flatbed on the top, as you go down, your wedge sort of decreases, right? Like,
And that's how screwed up like our Overton window is, right?
That's true.
That the mainstream belief is that it makes more sense for like one man who owns a corporation to like have the ability solely to himself to own resources on the land in which like a society lives on.
yeah.
That's insane.
Well, and it certainly isn't working well. So like we can argue about the theory behind it all day long, but right now the gap between the rich and the poor in this country is, I would argue, the number one problem above all other problems by a fairly large gap. And the way that you explain that, again, I think you can have different political views on how you explain that problem, but it's hard to say that like some people having billions and billions of dollars while many people can't afford to eat. I think that's probably should be top of the list of our issues. So anyway, I just want to put the Burkina Faso on the map for everybody. I think that's kind of an interesting happening, and much of the 70s and the 80s of what we did militarily was fuck with countries like that, was destabilize, fund coups, etc., fund opposition groups, etc.
Yeah, we'll start to know this country a lot more around America because we're gonna have a lot more immigrants coming from there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's get into this one a little bit, actually, because I'd love to hear your take on it. Where am I at in my list? Okay, so there's two. I got two here. Des, give me this first one. Listen to this guy.
From the surprise files, when was someone going to tell us that China purchased Easy Pass and our information for $1.9 billion? Make sense of this. The New Jersey Turnpike's $1.9 billion Easy Pass contract raises concerns about the ties to China.
So there's that one. Hold on, just because there's this other one that's going to come that's more local, that comes in right after.
Big it is.
That's
It's
this one.
337,000 square feet, sitting on 23 acres of land, and it's very close to the Nashua Airport, several defense contractors, and an FAA control center.
I had no idea, so I did some research both in English and Mandarin Chinese, which is my first language, and I was
That's the
shocked.
company.
Lily Tang Williams.
So I want to discuss this because I think this is one of those things that the language is interesting, right? China buys, Chinese national buys. It wasn't the country of China. It wasn't the Chinese government. And Chinese national just means a person from China. So there's definitely a piece of xenophobic.
Oh yeah.
China's buying us. China owns Joe Biden. China, whatever, and that I want to push back on. However, on the other side, was something we were talking about last week. It does make me feel like America. This whole idea of American supremacy, long into the future. I don't know if we can't afford to keep our own water, etc. rights. What do you think?
I know that, water is probably more important to talk about, but Easy Pass. Mm-hmm. What do you mean?
Oh, so I think that...
What do you mean China?
So I think that a lot of those Easy Pass highways are privately
Yeah.
owned. So like the Easy Pass part
So
of the
who
private...
the fuck am I paying?
I'm not certain about this.
Well, okay,
but I
let
think
me
it
be
varies
clear.
state to
Let
state.
me
I
be
think there's
clear.
certain-
I am not paying.
I'm aware.
Let's be
I know
so
about
clear.
I know about your parking.
No, I think I'm getting threatened by collections in New Jersey specifically because I just haven't paid that Easy Pass. And
Those prices in New Jersey are no joke if you go on those Easy Pass roads.
I'm pretty sure I owe hundreds of dollars to Easy Pass New Jersey, especially because I hadn't paid it it's been years at this point that I've been getting this notification. I actually think I got a legal notice in the mail recently. I just haven't opened it yet.
So, well, that guy in the video was talking about the data because that's the new gold, right? And it's the thing that our lovely friend Elon Musk got out of his little foray into the government. Cost him $300 million, but he got all of our Social Security data. This is part of they passed this. One of the things that they did was in the name of better communication between departments of government, that all the government should have access to all the information, which sounds, if you don't think about it, sounds like it makes sense. All the government should have access to all the information. And because of that, Elon Musk, when he was doging, fake doging as it may be, was also able to get all this information, as did Palantir and Peter Thiel and all these guys. And the value of all the information, this is payment information. So Social Security knows all the things about you. Medicaid, Medicare know all kinds of ridiculously valuable information. And yeah, they definitely got that for their private. Well, because that's what AI needs, right? AI feeds off information. Yeah. They're building these giant AI infrastructures, and every little piece of information. Person A spent used $7,423 of Medicare last year, and they live in this town, and here's their Social Security number, and we can now link that to their driver's information and every little nugget of information in the federal government, and the corporations have that.
The framing of this is wild, and this can sound so random, but it reminds me of there were all these articles that came out when Bernie Sanders was running for president that said he was being funded by Russia.
Yep.
And then when you actually dug into it, they were there was a list of people that were American citizens with Russian lineage, and it was showing their names and stuff.
Yeah, and
30 donations from Russian people, American people who had Russian parents.
And it goes the some of the most successful attacks against Trump were Russia related, right? It's all this again. It's xenophobia. It's just something that I think they were right. The whole Russia collusion business. That was all. It's the exact same. You're trafficking the exact same thing, which is xenophobia, right? This is the other guys. Chinese nationals buy New Hampshire water rights, etc. So I think, again, my take on this is that from a national security measure, I'm not worried about it. But from a state of our country measure, it's concerning. It really does. It does seem to indicate economic downfall, and that we're not going to, that our current economic supremacy is not going to last much longer. It certainly doesn't feel like it's going to outlast the petrodollar.
Spending money on tank parades and stuff. What was that other thing that we spent money? Oh, FIFA, right?
Yeah, FIFA. Yeah, no, we definitely got to give them a ton of money.
I feel that's the bigger point there is just what are our priorities, right? I mean, we talk about economic supremacy. I don't know how attached I am to America being supreme or whatever, but yeah, it feels like water should be more important than sports teams.
I would think so. Yeah. No, I would think so. Certainly, if you got $695 million.
I mean, it's all in the imagery. I feel like they are the best. America is a great Instagram model.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty accurate, right? And we don't own the yacht, and
exactly.
we borrowed those shoes and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I got another one that, again, this is not. I should try and be more positive. I'm going to do next week will be positive, I promise.
This is why the mental health is declining.
No kidding. So here's another one. This guy's going to talk about a specific example, but I got a few. I got some of the stuff to go along with this. So let's listen to this guy.
Wild.
Hey, thank you.
Stellantis, the parent company of brands like Dodge, Ram, Jeep, Chrysler, and Fiat. Most of you know Stellantis by now. They reported their Q1 2025 numbers, and although the company's overall U.S. sales were down by 12%, which is certainly bad news for them, I almost didn't believe the drop-off that was reported for Dodge, because sales dropped by 49%. That is an unheard of fall-off. Now, I won't pretend like I didn't expect a sales drop off after all when what is essentially a V8 muscle car brand stops offering V8 muscle cars. You sort of have to expect sales to stumble, but I didn't expect it to be that bad. Nobody is buying the Dodge Charger Daytona EV. Dealers are cutting pricing on them as fast as possible in order.
So this reflects a larger trend in the automotive industry during COVID, when people were staying home and getting free money. Lots of industries boomed, right? So like REI sold more canoes than ever, and the housing industry did well, and the auto industry did phenomenally well, making a ton of money, and EVs were getting pretty sexy. After the Model 3 came out, and it was like, oh, there's an actual drivable, dailyable EV. That became the whole focus. Hertz invested heavily in EVs, the rental car company, and that sort of became the big push. Volvo talked about becoming an all EV brand. Jaguar talked about becoming an all EV brand. There's a few other ones, and Dodge, their most popular model, the big V8 cars that they have, they were going to make those all EVs. What's happened is that EV market has absolutely tanked. So Hertz is selling Model 3s for $25,000 at a no-haggle price, which is wild when you consider the premium people are paying for these. And I got a couple other little nuggets here, not that one. So I did a little digging myself. Here's one example. So a Mercedes EQS is like a big fancy luxury electric car, like most of the electric cars have been thus far. They're definitely targeted to the higher end rather than the practical working people end. And they were between 105 and 118,000 new as a 2022 model. And Des, go ahead and give me this. The average trade-in price for that car is $32,000 now. As a 3-year-old car, and that's with I think it's 30-something thousand miles on it. This is a problem. This is a problem not necessarily because of the cars. More EVs out in the world sounds like a good thing. There would be cheaper used cars for everybody, which is going to happen. The problem is the financial side of it. Americans have over $1 trillion in car debt right now. And I think it's something like 25% of people have over $1,000 car note. They have over $1,000 a month car payment. And if the economy slows and people start losing their jobs, this might be the equivalent of the housing market in 2008. This is a huge amount of value tied up in these assets that are very rapidly depreciating in price. And for those of you out there, do not go upside down in your car loan. If you don't know what upside down means, it's when you owe more on the car than the car's worth. It's a really, really bad idea. And what dealers will do, because that's the game, is let's say you come in and you want to trade in your car that's worth $10,000 and you owe $20,000 on it. They're not going to go, hey, idiot, you can't afford this car. Go figure that out, right? They're going to go, oh, no. We'll just roll it over into the next loan. So we'll take the extra $10,000 that you owe on this car and we'll add it to your next loan, to your next car. And they'll do that over and over and over again. I've seen some of these that people owe $100,000 on a car that's worth $20,000, $30,000. And you will absolutely devastate yourself financially. So do not flex in your car if you can't afford to flex in your car. It's just such a bad idea, and it's really, really scary what the financial fallout for this could be. So I just wanted to bring that one up because I'm a big car nerd, and it's a trend that is a little terrifying. All right. I got one more thing I want to hear your take on, because it's something we've talked about a little bit before, and I got two things related. Des, give me this one, please. So gambling. I, as someone who generally believes I'm generally a pro-freedom person, I was supportive of legalized gambling, but very, very fearful of said support. And it's another one of these things that I think is a real potential problem for poor and working people in this country. So here we go.
Literally going to spit out millions of young men who are craving and ready and teed up to be addicts. There is some new data coming out showing that when states legalize gambling, bankruptcies go up somewhere between 20 and 35%. Gambling addiction actually has the highest suicide rate because if you were addicted to meth, we would know it and we would try and do something about it. But if you got in over your head in online gambling and you felt like there was no way out, nobody knows it. And that's why it has the highest suicide rate of all the addictions. And Richard Reeves, the president of the American Institute for Boys and Men, just came out with a study showing that the incremental deaths of despair among young men has gone up so dramatically since 2004. We've lost an incremental 400,000 men, which is how many men we lost in World War II. And I think it's just going to get worse. And I know this is a terrible prediction, but unfortunately, gaming stocks are going to surge. These private equity companies rolling up rehab clinics are going to see a huge increase. Novo Nordisk and GLP-1 drugs are going to boom because they're going to start using GLP-1 to try and treat gambling addictions. And I worry that we're raising especially a generation of boys who seem to be more prone to addiction, who are just going to slipstream right into different types of drug and gambling addictions. We are literally going to...
So, some more lovely positive things. I first got hip to this. This first got on my radar, I should say, when I saw the DraftKings commercials, and they had every fucking buddy in the commercial. Like Kevin Hart's in the commercial, and Bad Bunny's in the commercial, and all the all the top athletes in the commercial, and everything. And I was like, well, those guys aren't cheap, right? Kevin Hart ain't doing your commercial for $75. So they must have an awful lot of money at stake. And just seeing from people I know and talk to, like, I know a lot of people who do a lot of online gambling on top of their annual Vegas trip or whatever. And I'm worried about it. What do you have any thoughts? What do you think about are you an online gambler?
I am not, no. I mean, it's incredibly scary and sad. I think I've always kind of tended to think about gambling similar to drugs,
yeah,
right? Where it should be legal, regulated, all that stuff, but the money that we, are now kind of putting into, arresting people and having people in jail for doing drugs could actually be, much better used in rehab facilities. Absolutely. And education and all of those things. Like if our goal is actually to, fix the root of the problem, right, rather than to make money for folks, but. I don't know. Some of that information there might have had me kind of rethinking some of those thoughts.
I don't know. It's really hard, and the thing that makes my heart hurt a little bit is what he said about people not feeling like there's resources out there. So if you are struggling with gambling, please don't hurt yourself. There are resources available for people. I'm sure there's not enough resources, and I'm sure we can do a lot better as a society as this problem inevitably grows. But don't, yeah. There's always help out there available, no matter how badly you get under. But this guy brought up a great point that I want to listen to as well.
A story about Jay-Z putting $1 million on the Thunder on the Fanatics Sportsbook. Kind of like when you see Drake posting about the Stake app, or like Dave Portnoy betting on DraftKings. We all know this is fake, right? They're getting paid to post that, or they have some sort of equity. But still, this feels extra dishonest. Like, my problem is not the gambling. I have no problem with gambling. My problem is this isn't gambling. Because even if the money is real, the risk is fake. Like, they have all the upside, but no downside. There's no skin in the game. It would be like doing an ad for cigarettes, but the cigarettes aren't lit. I mean, if you want to gamble, gamble, but don't try to play both sides.
So I just thought that was interesting because that's so true. Like they try and there's this whole like celebrity aspect to the gambling thing, which just seems so hokey to me. Des, what do you think?
Oh, I was gonna say is in a lot of the sports betting places they have like a thing where you can choose a celebrity's picks who you can pick of.
It's a great
and I think that's
point.
a really dumb thing because one, they're getting paid to have that pick, and two, like how do you know that that's a good pick? Like it's not.
No,
I think
that's
it's a really dumb thing.
That's a great point that they're parlaying their celebrity into making you make stupid financial decisions. Yeah, and it just I don't know. It feels like they're getting over on us. It's the same way I feel about politics when you see what happens in DC and you see what's happening on the TV. It just feels like we're the product, like we're the ants, and like they're just like ha ha ha, look at you, little peons down there. What do you got, Des?
I was gonna say, I think it's just them kind of preying on people in like shitty positions, because I feel like a lot of people who do gambling have like something in their head where they are just they're lacking the dopamine, so they want to go out there and go do something for it.
I think, I think a lot of these addictive behaviors are built into the way that we're wired, right? We're almost all prone to addiction. The other piece here is that it's financial, right? So when this is largely young men, this is largely people who are probably not financially in a situation where they feel like they can provide for themselves and their families, like they can make a future for themselves. So I can see being like, well, I'll just make sure I get the over and blah, blah, blah. And this is a path in which it looks like it's an acceptable way to earn money. And so I think it's like a double whammy, because like you're in the economic position is the one that makes you susceptible, right? And then the fact that we all have these sort of drug pathways in our brains.
And I was gonna say like that the promotion, the consistent promotion of it also doesn't really help a whole lot, because if it's somewhat socially okay to gamble.
Yeah.
So
and it's everywhere.
Exactly, and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You scroll, do 2 scrolls on Instagram, you see an ad for DraftKings, BetMGM, all that.
Absolutely.
So it kind of puts them in a spot where like, oh, I should give it a try, which is, like the gateway drug type of thing. Even though that's most of the time.
And I think it's just being everywhere. Like it's why I suck at quitting coffee, because I would love to not drink coffee, but A, it's addictive, and B, it's everywhere, and you're constantly reminding me how delicious it is and how much I love it and whatever, right?
So I think the
same thing with
throwing
gambling.
in someone's face
Yep.
constantly, it's not really a good.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, and you hit the root cause there again, right? It's like people are feeling economically desperate, like right,
Absolutely.
like that's got to be playing a role in the uptick here, and it would be cool if we were able to address that issue.
It would certainly be cool if we were able to address that issue. All right, let's transition and let's talk more about you, Kyle, because it's been great hearing your takes on things. Tell us about how did you get into the politics roughly, and then how did you specifically get into politics where you're at now?
Yeah, so I was actually doing music for a long time. That
Cool.
was all I wanted to do. And then I think there were a lot of kind of forces pushing me more and more so into activism, whether that was like Trump's election, whether it was being inspired by Bernie Sanders and for the first time wanting to like volunteer for a campaign, and wanting to get involved in March for Our Lives and the Women's March and all these things, and I think there was this middle ground where I thought I could use my platform as a musician for the cause that I cared about, and then I think I slowly realized I kind of only cared about the causes, not so much the music anymore. And also I had terrible experiences in the music industry, as most people do. But yeah, then I wanted to get involved in politics. The more I was helping other candidates out, the more I wanted to be a candidate myself. Started looking at who were the kind of local politicians in my area. I looked at the state senator that I had that I felt had a record that was, left a lot to be kind of desired.
Yeah.
In terms of, my values and progressivism, the causes that I cared about. So I took a crack at it and failed miserably, got like 25% of the vote against a long-term, pretty popular incumbent. But that was a very helpful kind of foundation, and then running for city council, and I think I had a more compelling message the second time around, talking about kind of what made me a little unique in that race. I am now the only renter on the city council.
Wow.
More or less kind of the only working class person, being a waiter, actually having, had things like wage theft happen to me. There were conversations in the council happening at the time when I was running about how do we protect renters? How do we protect, working class people from, bosses that are taking advantage of them? And I felt like I was kind of symbolically raising my hand and saying, I should be a part of these conversations, or someone should that can actually speak to these things. I'm much, much younger than the average person in the council, so Yeah, I wanted to kind of give representation in a few different ways.
So this is this is in Salem, Mass. Is that
Yes.
your hometown forever?
No, grew up in Lexington.
Okay.
Moved up to Danvers after high school, and then moved around a ton for music, and then kind of came back to the North Shore.
Okay.
And really fell in love with Salem.
How long had you been living in Salem when you got involved?
Not too long, only 2 or so years.
Wow.
But I was living in Danvers, right next to it, for quite a while before that. And that was kind of my message as well, was that Salem was kind of my dream city for a long time.
Yeah.
Even though I was living in Danvers, I was commuting to Salem for work, to hang out with friends, to, enjoy all Salem has to offer, but really couldn't afford to live in Salem. And it took me a while to kind of get there. And so that translated a lot to the issues that people care about, whether it's the housing market being insane everywhere, but Salem is particularly really in a crisis, as well as traffic and congestion. Right,
Yeah.
You have people that are working in Salem, whether it's in restaurants or teachers, people working in hospitals that are so core to our our fabric in Salem, tour guides that can't afford to live in Salem, right? They're living in more affordable communities that they then have to drive to and from and be another car on the road. So,
And that drive
yeah.
sucks. Driving that my least favorite part about Salem is getting to and from Salem. It's
yeah,
it's
and
my favorite.
unaffordability has a huge is a huge factor in that.
So you mentioned something that I think is so interesting. It's something that it's so easy to forget about how important it is. You mentioned about being the only renter on the council. And I think it's one of the things that turns people off so much from federal politics is like, oh, so all those millionaires who are friends with billionaires are making all these decisions and they have no idea about what I care about in my life. And I think it didn't occur to me that would be an issue even on the local level. And it is like the concerns of a renter, which has got to be half of the, I don't know what the numbers are.
Half the city in Salem, yeah.
So, okay, there you go. Half of Salem. Not being represented on the council is a big deal.
Yeah.
And like a sneaky big deal, right? Like it's one of those things you wouldn't think. It's not a demographic. We talk about that frequently, but for the actual work of what you're doing on a city council, it's got to be pretty essential.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we touched on it earlier on, but, national issues get so much attention. And I think it's easy for people to forget, local politics like hits you pretty closely, right? I mean, when we're talking about housing, you're talking about whether you can afford to keep living in your city, right? The people that have power over that is the mayor and the city council. So I think that's kind of a focus for me now running in the second term, especially as we have this focus on national issues, is how do we kind of take this newfound energy of people really paying attention and funnel that down to the local level, right? Because we have it's pretty abysmal, the local voter turnout. And that's always been kind of a focus and a concern and something that we talk about. How do we improve upon that? And I have a lot of ideas, but I think there really seems to be that potential right now.
So you're, for other people interested in getting involved, your sort of first step was going and getting involved in other people's campaigns, sort of getting that. Then how did you? And you said you had one unsuccessful campaign. When then the second time was your victory.
Correct.
How was that different than the first time? What did you learn? What made you successful?
Yeah, I think that I learned how important the kind of human aspect of politics is. I think in my first campaign, I thought I would go to voters door by door and say, I want Medicare for all for Massachusetts. And just kind of list my values at them. And then if they agreed with those, they'd vote for me. And I felt like, there's a progressive city. I think I like my numbers. And constantly the kind of response I would get back is, where'd you go to school? How long have you lived here? Like, what did you study in school? Right? People were trying to find ways to get to know me as a person. And so I think in the second election, part of the reason why that was successful, I think I did a lot more listening to people rather than talking at them.
Interesting.
And a lot more just kind of connecting with people on a human level. I think people are a lot less ideological than we assume them to be, and
That's a great point.
what they more so want is someone that they feel like they can trust and seems like a good person that gives a shit. So.
That's personally some food for thought, I gotta say, because I think it's very easy for people like us who get into these issues to think about it on a purely intellectual, like what makes sense. And like for me, like that's just how my brain works. I'm like, well, whatever the best answer is the one we should be doing, and like we should analyze and figure it out and like whatever. And I think what you're reminding me of is that more often it's about in the interpersonal relationship, it's about the narrative and the story that goes with that, not necessarily like, well, when we calculated all the options and blah blah blah. That's such a
And I'm an incredibly ideological person, don't get me wrong. I think that those types of conversations, right, where we talk about me being at this protest and trying to get kind of mainstream liberals to shout abolish ICE with me, I think that's possible because I already had a foundational kind of interpersonal relationship with a lot of people that were in that crowd, right? Rather than someone who's like, who is this stranger at my door trying to like convert me to like radical left-wingism or whatever someone might be thinking. I think that trust needs to be built a little bit first.
No, it's very true, and it's something that we've talked about too, like around your building your business, Danny, is that like so much of it is relationships, right? Like so much of the work is in relationships, and that's for people like me. That's really hard to hear. Like I don't want to do all that. I just want to be right, and like the right answer should win, and that's just not how the world works.
Yeah, and I think it also helped me in the second campaign. There was probably a more stark contrast between me and one of the people. It's complicated in city government, so there's 4 at-large counselors, so I wasn't necessarily running against one in particular.
Right.
But there's one in particular that I could contrast myself very well with. And I thought that was the case with the first person I ran against, but that wasn't the perception, right? There was kind of assumption, okay, she seems vaguely liberal, I'm sure she's doing her job. The person that I was able to defeat, the incumbent, who was a very, pretty long-term incumbent, who even had, clear aspirations for higher office. He was a slumlord, right? So we're talking about an election between someone who's a slumlord, is friends with all of Salem's landlords, can't trust to, make affordable housing, period. And then there were a lot of kind of shady campaign tactics, right? You would walk across Salem and you would see his signs on like every other door. And then if you talk to the people that lived at those doors, they either didn't know who he was or would say, I don't support this person. My landlord does.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't even think about that as a factor, right?
Yeah. And it was intimidating for me at first. Like, oh my God, this guy seems to be incredibly popular. You have to remember that signs don't vote and that, he was running a pretty kind of dishonest campaign. But to be able to say the only potential renter on this council versus someone who's a known slumlord in Salem, that was a very helpful kind of campaign theme.
I mean, I imagine that would resonate with people. Certainly other renters, right? Like you're talking about a guy who's got no incentive to make the situation better, right?
And people just thought it was wild that there wasn't a renter on the council, right? And it's disappointing, but it's necessary for campaigns to kind of bring that information to people. Just on a local level, like any kind of local media is just quickly becoming non-existent.
Yeah.
Right. We don't even have. We used to when I first got on. This year we don't even have someone from the media coming to city council meetings. So there's just no reporting on what is being voted on. Right. So how would someone know? Okay, this councilor owns a home, let alone like what their even policies and what their voting record is.
How do we change that? Like, how do we change that apathy about local politics? I don't know the better way to say it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like it needs to come from a lot of different angles, right? I mean, I think local media is a huge component to that, right? Like that needs to exist. It just needs to. Like there's no functioning democracy on any level without someone letting people know what's happening.
The only representation I see now for like news at the local level is like TikTokers, basically, like social media people.
Yeah.
So like anybody out there, like you're looking to start a new TikTok channel or whatever, like go film city council meetings in your city. Like
Yeah.
those are that's valuable information that people want to have, and I think there's certainly a big need there. And I know it doesn't. Musician we had on the show, he does that. I'm blanking. Julian Mendoza, doesn't Julian do that stuff, Danny?
I think so.
I think he does. He got involved and did exactly that. Was getting involved in filming his was I can't remember. It was I want to say a Boston burb that he lived in, but yeah.
You talk a lot about accessibility to the public as well, like accessibility to the actual voting times, like it's happening during work hours and.
Yeah. I mean, that's like certainly an issue, like especially on the federal level, right?
Oh my God.
I mean,
yeah.
I remember a situation like going to vote in 2016, the first election I could vote in federally, and it was kind of this, the manager walked up to three of us and said, okay, I can cut one of you if like it's important for one of you to go to vote, right? And that's like a situation that happens because like voting isn't taken that seriously in this country, right? I mean, in other countries, campaigning, ads, going door to door, all of these things are more or less irrelevant because people take it upon themselves to educate themselves, right? And I never want to blame people. I think it's an institutional issue. I think it's an education issue.
It's a cultural issue too. Like our culture is not one of involvement and civic engagement.
But like accessibility is huge. I mean, like the state government of Massachusetts is the least accessible, a transparent state in the country.
Really?
Yes. In terms of, we don't know how people are voting. There's what is the term? It's like blind roll call votes, right? That are like closed to the public.
Really?
Yeah, it's changing now. There's finally a bill that's making it a little better, a lot better, depending on who you ask. But yeah, that's been a huge fight. When I ran for state senate, which was my first campaign, I signed something called the Voters Deserve to Know Pledge, which was created by this really great organization called Act on Mass, a Massachusetts advocacy organization. But their one big thing is people deserve to know how their elected representatives are voting on things, which is insane that organization would need to exist for that cause.
Right, like right on its face. Like, how is that not obvious? It's something we were talking about the big beautiful bill, like the whole idea of these like omnibus massive like things when we're gonna lump 1,000 issues that have nothing to do with each other all together, so that the Congress people have cover, right? You can never hold them accountable because they can say, well, I didn't vote for that, I voted for this in the same bill. Like, no, do your job, vote on issues.
So there's another organization named Progressive Mass, and they do a really good job. They actually send someone in to meet state legislature meetings to report on how everyone's voting, right? And they have because they're a progressive organization, they kind of have a progressive scorecard, and they say this is how we wanted them to vote, this is how they voted, and then they score people. And the person that I ran against for state senate had a D rating from them. And the only reason I knew how she voted on different things and knew that I would vote differently is because of that organization, right? There was, even after kind of going backwards, if I was to look up that bill and try to find reporting on it from the Boston Globe or whatever else, it just wasn't there.
It's so important though, because you have your progressive sort of bent on things, but for everybody, every single voter should have a right to vote knowledgeably and in line with their values, right? Like, I don't know, if you're a hardcore Catholic and you want to do the most Catholic voting you can do, that should be the right that you have, right? Like, if you're a gun nut and you want to be the most Second Amendment voter you can be, right? Like, we should know exactly how our politicians are voting, and the fact that there needs to be an organization to step in and like fill this gap is ridiculous.
Without that, we make assumptions based on whether they have a D or an R next to their name, right? And just like you're saying, that disenfranchises conservative voters too, right? Because there's a lot of people that, live in that district that I was running to represent that are conservative leaning, that despised the person I was running against. And it put me in a weird position because to tell you the truth, I think what they voted on is actually a lot more in line with your value, but they would have no idea.
Right.
And I think the other big thing is just campaigning differently. There's a trend, I know it's the case in local politics. I don't know how much in terms of bigger campaigns, but to only focus on super voters, right? People who are reliable to vote in every election, right? And it's logical. You don't want to waste your time. And I think there's a lot of candidates that, work full-time jobs. Maybe they're raising kids, whatever. They want to, focus. But the more that's kind of normalized and accepted and is the way that we always campaign is the thing that perpetuates that cycle.
Absolutely.
Right? So we have an incredible majority immigrant neighborhood, which I actually live in Salem, El Punto, the Point. And yeah, it's majority Dominican, and the voter turnout, I think, was like 8%.
Wow.
In the last municipal election, at least for their ward counselor. And I just refuse to believe that that's the cap. And
Right.
and it checks out, right? I think it's reasonable to assume that 8% of the people that live there are super voters, right? Because it makes sense. You're coming to a new country, you're settling in, these kinds of transitions take a long time, right? But if we're not even trying with these people, if we're not even knocking on their doors and trying to give the argument and say why it's important to vote, let alone like why it's important to vote for me specifically, we're just giving up on like huge swaths of our community.
So right about that. I feel like that's a huge thing I hear in that area that's part of my territory is they are very into their community. And if they don't feel like they're a part of the bigger community, they're not going to put themselves out there because it also puts them at risk of being, seen in a way that maybe they don't want to be seen in terms of like immigration status or, maybe they're on the government programs that everyone's talking about. And, there's that perpetuation of stereotypes where, they're all taking advantage of these. So if they don't know your opinions, if they don't know who you are, they're not going to
Right. That trust needs to be built.
open themselves up.
Yeah. And I think poor and working people are very sensitive to wasting their time. Right? Like if they don't think that voting is if they don't have a clear idea of like, here's why voting is worth my time. Like I'm too busy. I just worked a 12-hour shift and the baby's screaming, I think that's a lot of people in this country are in that situation with politics, which is, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy and they don't care about me.
That's the other part of it, right? It's the campaigning. And then it's actually like, once you're elected, do something to help people's lives. You can start to break through that. Nothing's ever going to change. Doesn't matter who I vote for. This road hasn't been paved, whether it was a Democrat or Republican. Like all of that, let's try to cut through that.
So what do you try? So you got your second term that you're running for right now. When is that election, and what are your priorities?
It's November 4th.
Okay.
Affordable housing is still atop of the list.
Yeah.
I've put local government's frustratingly slow. I put a lot of things forward in my first term that I want to finally see become enacted in my second. So I've started conversations around forced brokers fees.
What does that mean?
So people in Salem is becoming a lot more common. In fact, about half of listings right now want people to put down first, last security, and a broker's fee.
I thought you were only allowed to ask. Maybe I'm probably going to date myself. It's probably something that's like 30 years old. But I thought you were only allowed to ask for double the rent as a down, like first and last,
God,
or
no,
like first and security 100 million years. Yeah.
A lot of times the broker's fee is equal to a full month's rent.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What?
And things are already so unaffordable in Salem that we could be talking about $12,000 to move in, which
Nobody
renters
has.
do not have.
No.
They don't. And this
That's
is
why
for
they're renting.
Well, what percentage of Americans have 12 grand in the bank right now?
And if they did, they put a down payment on a.
Of course.
It's a whole other can of worms. But back in the day, they would have.
Yes.
But this is for a broker that they did not hire, and in most cases didn't even interact with. Right, the landlord hired them.
So have you been? I listen to lots of podcasts and get the commercials that go along with them. And there's what's his face? Jeff Goldblum. Have you seen the rent? Is it rent.com, something.com? Jeff Goldblum is in a commercial for a rental, basically a website for landlords. Oh, the landlords for exactly what you're talking about. A website for listing. I don't know if it's rent.com. I only know because I've seen the commercial 1,000 or heard the commercial 1,000 times. And again, Jeff Goldblum. That's a big money advertisement, whatever. So, and I didn't get it when I saw it because I was like, well, there can't be that much money in brokering rentals. And because I've all my rentals, I've like gone on Craigslist and you talk to the guy and like whatever. It's like a very sort of informal or like not. I didn't see the place for someone to make money in that in that exchange. So you've totally opened my eyes. I had no idea that was a thing.
It's wild, and I think because we don't have tenant protections like that, it makes the problem of not building enough housing even worse. And those things kind of play into each other, right? Because if the supply is so much less than demand, then people have to say, okay, well, the only apartment that's, within transit distance for my job, the only one that's available, the only one that, works for me and my partner is requiring a broker's fee. So I have to pay it.
Right.
Right. So the other kind of big part of it, another focus is actually building the housing that we need so that people have that kind of variety and options.
Because the supply would essentially solve that first problem, right? Like if there was enough supply, people say, "If you and your broker's free, I'm going to go to another house the place that does
exactly,
it." Right?
Yeah. And we've seen places around the country like Austin that have really leaned into this as a policy solution, and it's wild the results, right? So places like Austin and Minneapolis, and there's a long list, have done things like allowing multifamily housing citywide, allowing for taller buildings, allowing for smaller houses. A lot of communities have zoning codes that say a house has to be on a certain lot size.
Yep.
Which you can see how that would make housing more expensive because land is the most expensive thing. So if they want to make a profit off of that house, it has to be, a large house. And a lot of that's why we're seeing $500,000 and up houses be the only options that are out there, as opposed to if you could have tiny homes, which is something I'm obsessed with personally.
Obsessed with.
Yes.
So this relates back to something we were talking about recently in New Hampshire. There's a big debate in the state house about very similar things. So there's a debate on whether to do zoning reform statewide or to continue to leave it up to towns, because New Hampshire has the exact same problem, right? We just don't have enough houses.
Got to do it statewide, right? We've seen that battle in the state, and we've seen very wealthy communities that are just trying to say, put their foot down and say absolutely not. But the point being, in places like Austin and Minneapolis that have done this, we've seen rents go down as far as 20%.
Really?
Yes. In a national economy where, of course, like rents are rising everywhere else. We've seen people, this is now a common occurrence, where people are being contacted by their landlords and being offered a rent decrease because they want to keep them on as tenants, right? So you're putting power in people's hands rather than landlords, right? Because they have the ability to squeeze people if, people are deprived of, abundance of options.
Yeah.
In Salem, only 13% of the city, you can build something with more units than a single family home.
Wow. And again, the libertarians out here should be on your side on this one, because
it's a freedom thing.
Yeah, it is a freedom thing. What zoning laws are effectively doing is taking your freedom to do with your property what you choose to do with your property.
What do you mean I can't subdivide my house and rent it out so I can, get an extra income? I can't put my aging mother in a backyard cottage in the back of my house. Like, it's a freedom thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that absolutely it should be something that we can find common ground on and go beyond the old political RD, blue red stuff, because I think so many of us, the vast majority of us, vast majority of us need more housing. Like
There's
for
a lot
90,
of wealthy liberals that don't like housing.
that's true, but that's such a wealthy period, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
right,
outright.
right.
But that's such a small percent. The people who benefit from this current situation in which we have not enough housing, huge regulations in lots of directions that don't help regular people, and incredible power for the people who have these assets, right? When we had the last few years, BlackRock buying up single family housing and whatever, like anything we can do. Well, I guess what I'm saying is this, as a number one issue, makes a lot of sense to me.
So housing is huge, environment as well. Trying to pass a gas leaf blower ordinance.
Okay.
It sounds like a small ball issue. The more I looked into it, I looked into it because we were getting a lot of complaints, mostly because of noise.
Yeah.
But also some, environmentalists. It's wild. Using a gas leaf blower for an hour can, emit as much carbon as a car driving 1,000 miles. And the reason is because there's no filtration.
Okay,
on gas leaf
and it's a
blowers.
two-stroke as well, yeah.
So it's incredibly dangerous for, the workers that are using them. They're loud as hell, and they're destroying our air and environment. So I'm excited about that one.
So I get it. I worry with this the electric stuff because I assume the move is to electric leaf blowers, right? Mm-hmm. My worry is that when we move to things that require lithium-ion batteries, that we're exporting pollution rather than eliminating pollution, right? Because like the environmental footprint of that lithium-ion battery is pretty high. So
yeah, and it's a similar thing to like electric cars, right? Where it's like, okay, there's also a pollution element from the get-go there, right? Like electric cars need to be manufactured,
right?
In a not so clean way, but then over the course of usage, you more than make up for it.
And I would imagine in a city, it's certainly for cities, absolutely benefit from electric cars, right? Like just the density, and somewhere like Salem, which is also for a nice sort of green city, is still fairly densely populated. So I imagine that would have a for your ground level ozone would have a pretty positive impact.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's trying to find ways to lower our carbon output, but then also trying to kind of desperately at this point protect against the climate effects that are already here, right?
Yep.
And we're a coastal city, so flood mitigation is a huge issue. And, we really kind of need a federal partner in that, which we absolutely do not have. So we have to get really creative about how do we find funding for, giant seawalls across, a 14-mile coast. So that's a huge challenge as well.
Yeah. Wow. So you said November. When was the date of the
November
election?
4th.
November 4th.
Yep, that first Tuesday.
And is that just a local election for you guys? That's just there's not a national. There's
No.
nothing. There's just you guys.
Just
so
us.
it's just us.
Yep.
So that's the challenge for the local. What's the turnout usually on those just local elections like?
I want to say it was like 26%.
That's not as bad as I bet it is in a lot of other towns. That sounds not terrible.
I might want to double check that, but I think that's and I think it is pretty in line with other.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just I think we could do better. Because we know that there's people are showing up for other elections, right? So it's like, how do we get people to not just vote in federal elections?
Yeah. Do you think is there someone gunning for you this time?
Oh yeah.
You got a target on your back?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What does that look like?
So we've got he now represents Ward 4.
Yeah.
A pretty conservative counselor. We pretty much gotten along pretty well, like been respectful and everything. He's now running for at-large. And it feels like a very trying to make a comparison and contrasting between me.
What you did to the last guy, he's trying to do to you.
Yeah.
Nice.
It looks that way.
How do you think you have good rebuttals for his for the claims he's going to make? Like, do you think you got a good argument?
Yeah, I mean, I think like local politics is so interesting. There isn't a lot of kind of directness.
Yeah.
And I think, the fact that, like I said, we've got 4 at-large counselors. I don't know how much he's going to want to say, like, I specifically want to replace, Kyle Davis, right? And that's not something you can really...
Right, but in the same way that you did during your election, right?
Right,
Just making
yeah.
that contrast between someone who already has a seat.
But it was just as possible that I could have won that election and the person that I was very different from
Also
won,
won, yeah.
and we knocked out someone else.
Someone low, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think I have a lot to be worried about. It's an incredibly progressive city.
Yeah.
So I think, the voters are kind of on my side. But I'm certainly campaigning like someone that is nervous.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other? We have some standard doing better show questions that I'd like to shoot at you.
Yeah.
Do you have any other things you'd like to talk about before we get to that?
No, I say go for it.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so what's had a bigger impact on you? The place you're from or the places you visited?
Ooh, that's an interesting one.
We try and keep them interesting.
I want to kind of go for like a secret third option.
Ooh, I like
of
it. Okay,
my
good.
found community of Salem. Like, I don't think...
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, whether it was like growing up in Lexington, I think I never felt super in love with it or connected to it
Yep.
in any kind of like real way. I felt connected to like the house that I grew up in. And same thing with like all the places that I visited. I mean, I toured quite a bit as a musician.
Yeah.
And I think, I for a long time growing up in Massachusetts, I envisioned myself like, I got to get out of here. Like I see myself in 5-10 years, like finding my like found community somewhere else. And it's wild to me that it was somewhere else in Massachusetts, just happened to be Salem. And yeah, it was incredible that I just like fell in love with the people and like Salem itself. I never thought I'd be so attached like to the city that I live in.
That's awesome. That's such a great answer. I like that third
Thank
rail
you.
option.
Yeah, secret
Good.
third option.
Yeah, I like it. What is one thing you're doing better now than the old you, and how did you make that change?
Ooh. These are good questions.
We're all about growth here.
Yeah.
At least we can end positive, even though we had a whole 71-minute spiel of negativity to
I know.
earlier
I
on
think
today.
I'm actually like phasing out.
We've lost a panelist.
Yeah. So what's what's one thing?
I think something is my kind of growth edge, and something I've struggled with is being very impulsive.
Okay.
And I think that's come a lot from having ADHD.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think like trying to find a way to navigate my instincts versus what is actually going to like produce tangible like long-term results, right? So I think I imagine myself as this kind of like wrecking ball going into city council and like never letting someone say something that I disagree with in private or public without like calling them out across social media and like on in the news and whatever else, right?
Seth Moulton.
Yeah, which I have no regrets about.
No?
Seth Moulton is horrible and a fascist enabler and all those things. And I think, yeah, it's not always the smartest thing to do long term. And I certainly got in way more trouble than it was worth in the first maybe half of my first term before I started to think a little more strategically.
Interesting. Is there that's a first of all that's a great one. I think it's very as we grow older, it's always good to be keeping in tune with like what do you want and like what is actually happening and like making sure those are aligned. That's great. What's the Seth Moulton story?
So Seth Moulton at the end of last year made a lot of transphobic comments.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, and it's not even like the right thing to do, I guess, to repeat them. But I think
I don't need to hear them. But
yeah, and I think
I always thought he was sort of a century-ish type. No, I don't know his politics well, but he's been in the game he's been putting lawn signs out for decades, right? Like Seth Moulton's been around.
I think sadly a lot of kind of centrist people are now leaning in that direction. Centrist politicians, I think they learned a lot of wrong lessons from the election.
Okay.
And are now thinking they need to kind of, throw like vulnerable communities under the bus in order to be more politically expedient,
Yeah.
which I think is incorrect morally and politically.
I agree. I think it's a misreading of the tea leaves.
Yeah.
I think, absolutely.
So there was a huge backlash from that, and I think maybe as a backlash to the backlash, or maybe it was already kind of a plan of his, he's certainly continued to move right. He just voted a couple weeks ago for a resolution to thank ICE and to call
I saw that.
to call for more collaboration.
Anybody who votes for any resolution to thank or recognize or acknowledge anything, and like, fuck off. Go do your fucking job.
Yeah.
Like, we have major problems in this country, and anyone is like, oh, we need to recognize the blah, blah, blah.
Right.
No, we don't. You
And
need
also-
to go solve some real fucking problems. Build us some roads and build us some houses and, like, whatever. Like, do stuff.
And read the fucking room, right? So
Yeah.
we've got these No Kings protests happening all across the country. We've got 1,000 people screaming, abolish ICE.
Right.
And I heard from the organizer of the event that he was behind the scenes begging to come to that event and speak at it.
Are you
And
kidding?
yeah, and these organizers, I give so much props to them for saying, you know what, no. And I think it was probably in Seth's best interest as well, because I don't think he would have been received well. And this is, Salem is not a small part of his district, right? I mean, if you look kind of geographically, you can find a lot of kind of more rural, maybe more moderate leaning areas, but their populations are nothing compared to communities like Salem and Lynn,
Right.
full of working class, full of queer people, full of Hispanic people that he's also clearly, kind of throwing under the bus as well. So, I definitely kind of had a back and forth with him for sure.
I think in general, politicians overestimate the importance and the value of social issues. I think more often than not, people vote with their wallets. People care about the economic side of it. Sometimes right stuff will. I wouldn't put rights related stuff in like the social issue side of it, but like, so right stuff will get people feeling like their rights are under attack will get them to the polls. But more often than not, it's something economic in nature, and I think it's generally not the social issues. And that's unfortunate that he's felt the need to go that route.
Yeah, so I called for him to, resign pretty publicly, led a couple, protests, and his response was kind of very much a double down. I think he said something directed at me that was, well, if you don't like it, run against me, right?
Yeah.
Which I have no interest of doing, but I'm gonna help whoever does.
Yeah.
And we deserve a lot better.
Interesting. Thank you for that. That's something I didn't know about. All right. What is question number 3 on our of 5? Question number 3. What is one small change that individuals can make that would have a big impact on society? What's one thing that people could do better that would
I want to go get involved locally.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think it's very easy, again, to think, like, it's a very small ball thing to, like, knock on your neighbor's doors, get a list from a progressive candidate or whatever your politics are, but progressive, a list of 100 doors and try to get a ward candidate elected, right? That's something that, again, I think it can make a tangible difference in your community's life that you can immediately feel, and it's kind of easy to make a difference because of how little attention and how little people are involved. Like I always say, it's frustrating and it's disappointing that when we have city council meetings, there might be 5 to 10 people in the audience on a good day, unless there's something that's like really kind of like a lightning rod. And our online, there might have been like 40 views. But what that also means is that if you did have an organized attempt to like, let's all go to this city council meeting to demand something, it wouldn't take that many people for every city councilor in that room to be like, oh shit, people care about this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And even if you not ready to go support somebody, go show up, right? Go sit at city council and decide who you like and go support that guy, right? It's a great one. All right, shout out time. What is one person or group of people who have helped you do better in your life? Who's one of your biggest supporters that has helped you become the person you are today?
Oh my gosh.
This one was an issue last time because they're like, I don't want to leave anybody out.
God.
I'm not looking for an exhaustive list. Just one like, hey, that person really put in some work and now I'm better as a result.
Can I say like a group of people?
Absolutely, yeah.
I want to say like working class people, right? Because I think, being like a struggling musician and needing to pick up like working class jobs, like being a waiter, like being like an Uber driver, not only kind of gave me that like struggle that I didn't necessarily have, like growing up in Lexington, which people know is a like pretty wealthy community.
Yeah.
I didn't feel wealthy, but at the same time, like there was never a concern in my family about like food being on the table or anything like that. And the people that I met throughout that process, I think played a huge role in the development of my politics and kind of breaking down the barrier of my own kind of privilege and short-sightedness, or being blindsided about like the level of struggle that was going on, right? Because I think this was happening at a time where I'm being inspired by Bernie Sanders, who's saying things that I understand to be hypothetically true, right? Like I'm hearing statistics of, when he's talking about, the amount of millions of people that don't have health insurance or that are food insecure, or all of these crazy statistics. But then to also struggle myself and to meet all the same people going through the same things, that was pretty radicalizing for me.
No, that's great. Working people are always high in my book. My favorite thing about my job is I get to travel and meet new working people every week, and it's so inspiring and interesting. And I think we're sort of conditioned to fear poverty and fear the poor, and I think if you need something, if you're like hard up in life right now and you need something, you're better off asking a poor or working person than you are asking a wealthy person. They're far more generous.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a great one. Yeah. All right, last one. 2-part question. Part 1, what is your favorite food? What's your favorite meal to sit down to?
Crab rangoon.
Okay.
You're just on that right now.
Would you rather?
You have to think about that a little bit more.
I don't have to. I've been talking about crab rangoon all day.
Would you rather never eat crab rangoon again, or only
that
eat
was a
crab
setup.
or only eat crab rangoon?
That's exactly why I said you should think about that.
Oh, okay, that was smart. Okay, we've got protein. we've got carbs.
Can you change? You can't deconstruct, and you can't.
You could you want to do a deconstructive crab rangoon?
I'm not sure I got the deconstruction.
I saw an ad for crab rangoon ice cream
Oh,
earlier this
bro!
week.
Oh, that is a bridge too far.
I will say, anytime something sounds like wild and disgusting like that, it turns out to be really good.
Yeah, I had cheese fudge the other day, that was like fudge made from cheese, which again, like like cheese and fudge are fucking delicious. It was so good.
Yeah, I mean, my answer would have to be never crab rangoon again, as much as that hurts me. Because I mean, I still got pizza, I still got sushi.
Ooh,
I'll be okay.
Yeah, pizza and sushi. Yeah, that solves a lot of problems. Cool. Thank you so much for being here and
Thank you for
joining
having
us.
me.
It's been great chatting with you.
Awesome.
It's been great getting your perspective and learning a little bit about what you got going on. We would love to have you back when you get closer to the election. Maybe get some updates and
some more tea.
And war room stuff and like we got to get this part.
The last person we had running won, so
that's true.
This is good luck.
Okay, we got
That's
some
true.
good luck here.
That's true. Cool. Any last words from everybody? Kyle, any last words for the day? Anything you'd like to share before we leave?
Join DSA.
What
Free
is DSA?
Palestine. Democratic Socialists of America.
I will certainly echo Free Palestine. Do you have something else?
Crickets in my head.
Good. All right, fair enough.
She fell asleep 20 minutes ago.
Fighting through.
I'm fighting for my life. No,
Deezy, what do you got going on? Anything going on this week?
A lot.
Check out
going
Instagram.
on.
All right, cool. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Oliver. Oh, sorry, Des. We left Des out. Des, you don't have a mic anymore. What do you want?
Not much. Just
Any last words for the day?
no. I just don't like gambling. Gambling's bad.
Okay. Okay, gambler's bad. Okay. All right. I am Oliver Ox. This has been the Doing Better Show. Thank you so much to Kyle Davis for being here. Thanks as always to DZ and Amberly and Des and the rest of the team. You guys at home, thank you very much. We will be back next week with more Doing Better Show.